Welcome everyone. I'm here with Dr. Sunnie Giles. Sunnie and I go way back. We go back to Korea when we were both living in Korea. She was working as a marketing director for Samsung, and she has amazing experiences and has worked at many different places. She is now a consultant and has a PhD in systems psychology.
Yep.
Her MBA is from University of Chicago, Booth School of Business. And she has, I believe, a Master's of Accounting degree as well.
A bachelor's.
Bachelor's of Accounting, and worked for...
From BYU.
From Brigham Young University.
Yeah.
A great place to be. But she's been all over and has done a lot of really cool stuff. And today we want to learn a little bit more about you, Sunnie, and about some of the work you've been doing, the research that you've been doing, and how it can help future global leaders out there.
Okay, great.
So can you first tell us about yourself?
Well,
Your history.
Yeah, so I was born and raised in Korea, and then I came to the U.S. with just $70 in my pocket.
Wow.
And, scrub toilets at 4 a.m. to make a living, I guess, to supply the living expenses. And then BYU gave me a full ride scholarship after the first semester with my GPA 3.98. So wow. That's how I graduated with no student loans and honors.
Wow.
So that's to this day of all the things that I've done in my life, that happens to be the most important and accomplishment that I'm most proud of. So
oh, fantastic. And what did you do after you graduated from BYU? Where did you go then?
I went to work for Baxter Healthcare in Chicago.
Okay.
Working in corporate accounting. So
okay.
That's what I did. And then after 3-4 years of doing that, I decided to get my MBA. So went to Chicago Booth full time.
Oh, fantastic. And after that, what happened there? Where did you...
I went to Accenture doing strategy consulting.
Okay.
So for 3 years, I traveled all over, and I, worked on very many interesting projects.
Yeah.
Like the corporate strategy.
So you're seeing companies
Yeah.
and organizations all over the world.
Yeah.
Seeing what they're doing, how they're operating.
Right, exactly.
Fantastic. Helping them figure out how to solve issues.
Oh, that was an amazing experience.
Oh, fantastic.
Just exhilarating.
Yeah.
It's really fun.
And tell me, so you also went to Korea. So we met when you were working for Samsung.
Right.
And they had hired you, brought you out there.
From IBM, because after Accenture,
Okay.
I went to work for IBM.
IBM,
Yeah.
okay.
I was a program director and global brand strategist at IBM.
Wow. Okay.
And then when I went over there to Korea, I actually was the very first. I opened the very first brand marketing function, and in Samsung. So I was their general manager of corporate brand marketing. So,
oh, fantastic!
So it was really fun. I relaunched their corporate brand, and so. It was,
and at the time, Samsung was just a small company. Just kidding.
No, it was pretty big. It was pretty big.
It was massive.
Yeah.
Well, that's fantastic. Well, great. And then since then, you went back to school yet again and got a PhD in systems psychology.
Yeah.
And what does a PhD in systems psychology entail?
So it is looking at people not as a isolated, intrapsychic entity. Instead, I look at it as an interpsychic entities in the broader context of the system the person resides in.
Oh, wow.
So systems theory. I use a lot of that. Try to understand, chronologically from what impact their background has on their current way of looking at the world, as well as what's happening currently within the system with the other elements in the system. So that I use both in the personal setting as well as in the organizational setting. The principles are the same.
Huh. Oh, that's fantastic. And now you consult and coach and work with companies. You do fantastic research. I've read it and love it.
Thank you.
One of the pieces of research that you've been working on, that you worked on for a long time, that's published in Harvard Business Review and is getting a lot of press and a lot of interest, is on sort of global leadership competencies and what a global leader looks like today, especially. And I think you found that what we often think is a global leader from our old traditional models of leadership may not be the same as what it used to be.
Right.
And you see this globally, in different parts of the world. So
absolutely.
if you could tell us a little bit about sort of what you found, and then maybe how people can help. We're talking to future leaders here.
Yeah.
How future leaders can apply these principles and become better leaders themselves.
Yeah. So one thing that is consistently observed throughout all parts of the geographies is a higher level of complexity in the environment, and which is very different than how companies operated in the industrial era. Where the level of it's more of a complicated economy versus complex economy. The difference being, in the complicated economy, you might have maybe even many variables that go into the input. But because the process is pretty predictable, what comes out of it is something that you can control, predict, and manage.
Yeah.
And it's because the environment was relatively simpler than how it is now.
Yeah.
But right now, the environment is changing dramatically. And I mean, if you think about, so for example, Brexit is a huge, saga basically. The country, the entire European region has gone through such a trauma with that for several years. And if you think about what happened, what led to Brexit, actually, I've been following that for 3-4 years. And so how it actually started is with a Tunisian fruit vendor who self-immolated. So he was selling fruit in the marketplace, and he got fined for not having a permit. Okay. And the fine was more than what he could make in a day. And he got so frustrated, and he had his family to feed, and he got really frustrated. He went to a crowded marketplace, and then he set himself on fire. Oh. And if that happened 20 years before that, nothing would have happened. It would have gotten buried, and nobody would have found out about it. Yeah. But because when he did that, there are a lot of people around the marketplace who had cell phones. They took pictures, and they had social media accounts, so they posted on their accounts. And his plight resonated with a lot of Arab, youths, and that led to 28 days after that, the Tunisian dictator that was over the country stepped down, and that was the beginning of the Arab Spring. Oh. And when the same thing happened to Syria, Bashar al-Assad, instead of stepping down like a lot of his counterparts did in other countries, he led his country into civil war, which produced millions of refugees who started pouring into more affluent countries like Germany and UK. Yeah. And UK could not handle all those people that are coming in with the existing social infrastructure. Yeah. But they had to because of the Schengen agreement of that European Union. Mm-hmm. And as a result, they said, we can't handle this anymore. We want out. That's how Brexit actually happened. Huh. There are a lot of other, this is a very simplified version of it. There are a lot of other, more complex issues that are all interweaved. But this is one thread I've been following, and I've been seeing it. So it's like very interesting. But the issue is that if you're a leader operating a business in the UK, and you see this fruit vendor self-immolating, there's no way you're gonna make 5-6 steps, cross the dots all over the, 5-6 steps ahead and say, oh, that's going to lead to Brexit. That is never going to happen. Mm-hmm. It just speaks to the nature of complexity. The nature of complexity is unpredictable. Yeah. You can't manage, you can't control, you can't measure. Yeah. So how do you win then in that kind of an environment? In the past, in the industrial era, you manage, control, and you measure. That's how you won, because it was predictable. Now, it doesn't, those tools don't work anymore. Yeah. So then how do you win? It's all about adaptation and innovation. So that's why learning is so important.
Oh, interesting. So we refer to this in economics as uncertainty versus risk. Mm-hmm. So risk you can assess, you can measure to some extent. And uncertainty is something that you can't necessarily measure. It just happens.
Yeah, it just happens.
And in an uncertain environment, which we see more and more, you essentially have to be able to adjust and adapt on the fly and have some kind of resiliency around this. Yeah. So these are some of the things you're finding. So what are the 3 or 4 or 5 key competencies that a global leader needs to exhibit today? Okay.
So there are 3 categories that I can speak to. The one is creating differentiation. Okay. So what that means is that creating variety and creating diversity. So it's all about creating variety. So that's one category of competencies.
So would that be like if I'm my ability to come up with multiple options or multiple products?
Okay, so that is one aspect of it.
Okay.
But once you become a leader, it's going to be a lot more important for you to leverage that and then create leverage by using your skills to get that out of people.
Okay.
So then how do you maximize diversity?
Yeah.
You need to make it safe for people to speak up. So that's why psychological safety is a huge term in current management research. There are a lot of scholars looking at psychological safety, the antecedents and the consequences of psychological safety.
Yeah.
And why that's so important for innovation.
And that's interesting because we know the research shows that the more diversity you can create, the more diverse ideas or people coming with different ideas, it can actually lead to sort of, if you get a toxic environment or an unsafe environment, people won't speak up, and it becomes a sort of a stifling situation. Yeah. But if you can get people to talk and share, and that comes with that psychological safety where people feel safe to speak their mind.
Right.
Okay.
So maximizing diversity. So maximizing diversity without the next part that I'm going to talk about. If you do that, then you're not going to be able to have enough momentum to have a cohesive direction.
Okay.
That has to be, there's a checks and balance basically. So that's one area. So in terms of diversity, if you approach diversity as a diversity of, gender, sexual orientation, nationality, all that stuff, but if you don't have diversity of thoughts, you are not doing justice to the power of diversity. Okay. And a lot of companies actually, take the compliance angle instead of innovation angle.
Okay.
And that's where they fall short.
So you match the profile of someone who's diverse, but we don't want to hear your ideas that are diverse.
Then exactly.
Okay.
Then it's like you're putting a lipstick on pig's lips, basically.
Okay. Nice. Yes. I like that visual.
Yes. So you're not getting as much benefit out of the power, the power of diversity. Okay. So that's one aspect of it. The other aspect is what I call integration.
Okay.
So when you have a lot of different, a lot of people, tens of thousands, even a lot of employees doing different things. That differentiation creation is done through self-organization of employees.
Okay.
So letting them self-organize, and then the integration is providing general parameters for them to follow, so that you can create some momentum and cohesive direction.
Okay.
So without that, it will just disaggregate into chaos. Okay. So that's why you need to have the companies that are most optimal are operating in what they call the edge of chaos. Yeah. So somewhere between equilibrium and chaos, somewhere in between, where they're flexibly, they can go in and out, and there's checks and balance between the homeostasis and as well as chaos. Yeah,
and you're kind of moving back and forth sometimes, and it's not that you always have to be integrated or in alignment. In fact, to adapt to this dynamic environment, there are times when it's okay to be out of alignment because you're reconfiguring and figuring this out. So I got the first one is diversity, someone who
differentiation, variety generating. Yeah.
Okay.
The second part is integration, where you're providing a cohesion among the people. So that's why again psychological safety is important, because without that, you are not going to feel it. You need to have emotional connection for people to feel connected.
Do you have any examples of individuals or people you've seen who are good at that, or what they've done?
So many. So there are some techniques that this up and coming leaders can use. Would be like if you are a leader, speak last. Let other people say their piece first. Yeah. And don't do any value judgments in the stage of brainstorming, for example, or and separate the title of the person from the idea. So put the ideas, get all the ideas first and put them in the fishbowl. Yeah. And then talk about each one separately from the owner of the idea. These are a lot of the techniques that people can use to separate the two, so that people were safe enough to talk about and then put forward their ideas. Yeah. So these are some of the,
And it's a way to probably detach the sort of, if I'm attacking this idea, I'm not necessarily attacking
Correct.
you.
Exactly.
And so let's just kind of, okay, I like that. All right.
So, and then the integration is where you are, through power of cohesion. Why that emotional connection is so important is because emotional connection provides resilience. And in fact, there's a lot of research that shows that when people have a secure attachment with each other, their pain perception is actually lower. So that's a classic definition of resilience. You feel less pain when the same thing comes when you have secure attachment. That's why that is such an important concept.
That's what I need when I get my student evaluations.
Right.
That resilience, because it's like I see those evals and usually they're pretty good, but sometimes I get those ones that like Dr. Morris is the worst.
But those things don't.
And I need some resiliency on those ones because they kind of hurt.
So when you have like a secure attachment with your students, so then you take it as a feedback, source of feedback instead of taking it personally. So that's again, these principles they transcend the forms, if it's individual, organization, or it doesn't matter. These are universal principles.
Yeah. So I thought I was a good leader up until this last resilience one, right? So just kidding.
I'm sure your students will disagree.
That's fantastic.
You're great.
So is that the third?
No. So
resilience is part of that.
So the integration part is all about cohesion and interdependence.
Okay.
So interdependence, how do you maximize interdependency?
Okay.
You operate your organization in a network structure instead of the typical pyramid structure.
Okay.
So that's how you maximize interdependency.
And that creates resiliency.
Because like if the reason the network structure is important in a lot of different areas. I mean the angles, and one would be the robustness and so when one part of the network goes down, then other people can actually naturally fill in so that the organization can self-heal.
Okay.
That kind of a concept. So what that means is that when you hire people, instead of hiring somebody who is deep expertise, you hire generalists who are good at learning. Okay. That's how you need to hire.
Interesting.
So what I said, so I say the framework I give them is a T-shaped competency pattern.
Okay.
So T meaning broad top and one deep expertise.
Okay.
If you have this deep expertise without this broad top, your expertise will actually blind you because there's too many things coming at you, new things, without the broad perception and proclivity to learn and look at other things. You will be biased by your own expertise.
So this is like these. So if you're an engineer, this is kind of why we get these designed by engineers for engineer type of products that no one can use.
Exactly.
So if you're an engineer, this is the lesson. If you're an engineer, you got to have that specialty, but you also have to understand the market.
The broad
understanding.
Yeah,
okay.
Exactly.
Okay.
So,
all right.
So those things. So integration is based on the very clearly articulated team mission, vision, and goal, and that is where the cohesive direction that people go to, as well as the interdependence and emotional connection they have, as well as the network structure. Those are all concepts in integration.
Okay.
And then the last
third
category,
one.
it's about learning.
Okay.
Your organization has to be a learning organization. So what does that mean? What does a learning organization mean? It is about doing profuse experimentation and learning from each iteration instead of evaluating, putting evaluatory performance appraisal from each one. It's all about what do we learn from this instead of why did you fail? It's not about failing or succeeding. It's not about that. Because what innovation really is, it's a serendipitous result of profuse learning. That's what innovation is.
Okay.
So if that's the case, failure is a requirement. It's not. It should not only be tolerated, but it is required.
Okay.
So if you look at it from that angle, you design an experiment, and then you perform, and you look at the result, instead of saying, why did you fail? You're not going to get promoted next time. That is very counterproductive.
Yeah.
So instead of doing that, okay, what do we learn from this? How do we build it into the next iteration? That is
and that's valuable because you see a lot of this where companies will say, hey, here's a product, we've been working so much on this, and they test it, they do a pilot test, and they'll still launch it.
Yeah.
Because it's like, they don't know what was going on. Or, we tested this with 6 consumers, and they're like, well, you found 6 dumb consumers who don't understand this product because we know that it's a good product, so we're still going to launch it. And so what you're saying is actually, no, part of the process in being a good leader is about allowing for this failure
absolutely.
and saying, we got a failure. That's great.
Yeah.
That shows that we're close. We're getting closer. That's one experiment closer to getting the right product fit.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So, and then now there's, the companies, a lot of companies experience a dilemma because the dilemma is they're expected to deliver quarterly results. And that's how their company is evaluated. You have certain, earnings per share numbers that you're supposed to meet. Yeah. Then how do you balance between the two from the previous experimentation versus delivering results in the current quarter? One of the techniques that I've seen my clients use and that I encourage my other clients to do is actually to separate the pot of money for experimentation that is different from your ongoing operations. So that pot of money isn't experimentation money. Yeah. So you keep experimenting until you get the idea up to a certain point. Yeah. And then you transfer the idea into that operational team. Okay. So there's, if you have 2 different parts in the organization, one part focused on exploration, the other part focused on exploitation. Yeah. And then, making sure that transition happens smoothly. Yeah. And each person, each area develops their own expertise. The different sets of skills are required. Yeah. So, developing those skills and then naturally working together.
Oh, fantastic. And that's part of the problem, right? I mean, a lot of companies, we spend the exploiting existing products, technologies is what brings us the immediate returns, the quarterly returns that we need to deliver. Yeah. And when it's attached together and we're moving along on a project, we say, well, let's take the devil that we know versus the devil that we don't.
Yeah, you will have a lot of problems.
And so separating those allows you to sort of move. Okay, exactly. I like that. That's a good recommendation. Is there... are there differences across countries or regions? Have you found any difference? Because you've tested this all over the world, right?
Yes, I have. So what's really interesting is that there's a lot more enthusiasm around learning and experimentation and things like that in Asia Pacific. And in EMEA countries, the European and African, the EMEA countries are more, they're less likely. And so... But at the same time, it's about their enthusiasm for new technology and things like that. But at the same time, the culture of the Asia Pacific is such that they have so much deference to authority. Yeah. And they're very hierarchical. Yeah. So that's very and counterproductive for innovation. Oh, interesting. So that's very difficult.
So their energy and interest is in the exploration. Right. But there's also this tension, this cultural tension.
Culture as well as process. They're not optimized for innovation there.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah, in Americas, that is much more optimized for innovation.
Okay, so where does North America fit? So are they in the middle between their interest for exploration?
Yeah, and
between Europe and Asia Pacific.
Yeah, enthusiasm-wise, yes. Okay. And also, but in terms of process and culture, they're a lot more advanced in terms of stimulating innovation because where people are more used to having a more horizontal organizational structure in even culture, but where it's perfectly normal for somebody who machine operator to refer to the CEO by their first name. It's perfectly normal. Yeah. But you can't even envision doing that in Asia Pacific because they have such a very hierarchical culture.
So one of the challenges, I guess, is increasing the enthusiasm in the U.S. and Europe, and maybe improving the organizational structures
Yes, and process,
and process
Yes.
in Asia Pacific.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, fantastic. Are there any, so in summary,
Yeah.
if we were to just sort of give quick takeaway for our students and future global leaders,
Yeah.
is there anything you'd recommend, like just here's how to be a global leader? Any final thoughts or words?
Learn from experiments. Yeah, learn from and pay attention to the environment, not just get pigeonholed into, just bury your head in the sand and then this is what we're seeing. So instead of just looking at within the organization and what the organization, how you're going to be successful in the organization, lift your eyes and then look at the environment and see what's happening in the environment.
Okay, fantastic. Well, thank you so much. This is Dr. Sunnie Giles.
Hello.
And we had a great discussion on innovation and global leadership and what it means to be a global leader, not just on an individual level, but at a company level, right? To be a leading company in this space. So thank you.
Great, thank you. Thanks for having me.